Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. Today is September 15th, 2019. And today's topic, end of the Saudi petrodollar, start of the U.S. petro-natural gas dollar. It was announced today that the United States became not only the world's largest producer of oil, that happened a few months back, but became the world's largest exporter, passing Saudi Arabia. Now, there's been talk for years about the petrodollar and how it underpins the dollar, and then without it, it's dollar collapse, end of dollar hegemony, end of the petrodollar, dollars, days, or numbers, dollar collapse, de-dollarization, multipolar world, petro-yuan, gold back yuan, China to crush the dollar, gold set to skyrocket, all this nonsense. Well, back in 2014, and this is another one of those Smaulgld was right. I do not follow and just parrot what I hear on financial media or alternative financial media. I did a blog post and a video called "A Black Swan Emerges Covered in Cheap Oil." What was I getting at the time? I was getting at that I saw the shale oil market emerging. And I know that a lot of people were insisting that it was Saudi Arabian oil that was backing the dollar. The Saudi Arabian oil backing the dollar deal, the petrodollar arrangements, were important when they first came out. The reason they were important was because the United States had gone off the gold standard, meaning that the central banks that signed the Bretton Woods agreements could no longer bring their dollars to the U.S. Treasury and get them exchanged for gold at $35 an ounce, which meant, hey, why do we got to use the dollar? If Mario Draghi was around, he would say, why should we use the dollar when the fiscal policies of our country dictate that perhaps we use the lira? Or maybe in France they use the franc. So they were thinking, well, we don't need to have the dollar. And that drove Kissinger and Nixon into Saudi Arabia to say, look, we need to buttress the demand for the dollar. Everybody needs oil. You got the oil. So if you agree to price your oil in dollars and accept only dollars for your oil, that'll keep the demand for Europe. They'll keep them in line. They'll have to hold on to their dollars. They'll have to keep them as reserves. They'll have to spend them to buy oil. Fine. That worked. But over the last 40 years since then, countries keep dollars for reasons other than holding reserves just enough so they can buy oil. So that argument worked in the beginning. The dollar was supported in a transition period from the gold standard, which it ditched. Nixon ditched it in 1971. The petrodollar did help the United States through that period. But again, the petrodollar arrangements became less and less important as time went on, as other countries in Europe became, in a sense, addicted to the dollar, buying dollar debt, denominating their debt in dollars, and essentially becoming vassals of the United States dollar. However, if you need to have a backing to the dollar, meaning that countries need to hold dollars to buy oil, well, back in December 2014, I wrote in The Black Swan Emerges Covered in Oil, I said if U.S. shale oil takes off, the U.S. solves three issues. One, it becomes energy independent. Check. Two, it creates jobs. Check. And three, it no longer needs Saudi Arabia to create demand for the dollar because the export of shale creates its own demand for the dollar and replaces much of the Saudi Arabian demand. And then I updated the petrodollar thesis the next summer, the earlier summer in 2017. This was written in 2018, I believe. And then I showed how the big export numbers of U.S. crude oil were increasing as a result of shale oil. I also wrote at the time, since Saudi Arabia has only one card to play, oil, they can't allow the United States to make them less relevant through shale oil competition. Now, I did notice at the time, and a lot of people are still skeptical of the shale oil industry, not just for environmental reasons, but also because it is built, no pun intended, on a house of sand. However, what happens if shale oil companies can't make back their investment or are unable to service their debt? I think they're at the point now where maybe they can't and the price may hurt them, but these are, I believe, national security sites now. I don't believe that they're going to be allowed just to go bankrupt. They may go bankrupt and a larger company will come in and purchase them. I actually believe that this was re-dollarization. This was the purpose of investing in the shale oil, was basically to knock the Saudi Arabian reliance back a peg, even though it had already kind of faded back. Now, the issue with Saudi Arabia, at the time, people were saying this and they were getting really excited during the Obama administration, was Saudi Arabia looked like it might fall out of the orbit of the United States. The United States did the Iran deal. Saudi Arabia and Iran are mortal enemies. Well, that's all been turned around. So now Saudi Arabia is firmly in the United States court. The United States looked the other way when that guy, Khashoggi, whatever his name was killed in Turkey at the Saudi Arabian embassy. And Trump said, okay, well, that's their business, not ours. Saudi Arabia is too important. And indeed, Saudi Arabia right now isn't so much important to get oil from or even to back the dollar, but because their dollars back Silicon Valley. And that's a separate story, and I'm going to cover that today. But Saudi Arabia is a major investment in Silicon Valley, and that is another U.S. asset along with the dollar, the U.S. stock market, that is a national security interest, and they love to protect the stock market and keep it rising, so they want those Saudi dollars flowing in there. Saudi Arabia is less important to the United States to support the dollar through its oil, and it's less important as a source of oil since the United States now produces a lot of shale oil. Then in July 2017, I revisited the same thing as the United States dollar becoming the new petrodollar. With OPEC oil cuts and the U.S. oil production and exports surging, is the U.S. dollar set to replace the Saudi-backed petrodollar? I asked, is re-dollarization already underway? So I was on top of this in 2014, 15, and 16, 17, and I continued with the same thesis in 2018. The new petrodollar backed by U.S. oil, noting the U.S. oil production and export surging, continuing into 2018. Again in 2018, I noted U.S. to become world's largest oil exporter. Well, we've seen today that that has now happened. And in July of 2018, end of the petrodollar, long live the petro-yuan. That was another gold pumper story, that China was going to force Saudi Arabia to accept the game-changing yuan for payment from Saudi Arabia. And then the story went, but no problem, if no one wants the yuan, which a lot of gold pumpers say that everyone would want the yuan because it was going to replace the dollar as a reserve currency, which is complete and utter cow's nonsense, because the Chinese yuan is not a reserve currency for a reason. It's got capital controls. People don't trust the reporting, a lot less than the United States reporting. And they're relying on dollars. But they were saying, okay, if they don't trust the dollar, the yuan, what's going to happen is China's going to force Saudi Arabia to accept the yuan. And then, this is the gold-backed yuan game-changer nonsense story, the petro-yuan, was Saudi Arabia would just go to China and take the yuan and exchange them on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. Mike Baloney was touting this, actually called me out and said that I didn't know what I was talking about, and say they would just exchange their yuan on the Shanghai Gold Exchange for gold. Nonsense. That never happened. That was never planned to happen. That would be stupid if it happened. China would lose all of its gold. China was never offering that at all. There's actually a rule against exporting gold out of China. So then they quickly regained their composure and said, well, what's going to happen is that this is going to create excess demand, massive demand for gold, because Saudi Arabia is going to take the yuan and they go out and go buy gold with it. Well, if Saudi Arabia wants to buy gold, they don't have to exchange yuan for gold. They're getting millions and billions of dollars. They can go out and buy gold anytime they want. So, of course, this didn't change anything. But I wrote in 2018, there have been significant changes to the status of the dollar, the yuan, and the Chinese economy the past 2 years that disrupt the end of petrodollar narrative. But that doesn't stop. People have been on this end of the petrodollar, end of dollar hegemony. They never revisit the story. They just keep repeating it. And then they look for confirmation, which is classic amongst pumpers, confirmation bias. And then, of course, all the followers repeat the story, and it becomes an echo chamber. End of dollar hegemony, end of the petrodollar, dollars days are numbered, dollar collapse, and so on. Now, even more things happened since then. In October 2018, it became apparent that the United States was becoming the world's largest natural gas exporter. Uh-oh. Now you've got the United States as a huge oil exporter, a huge natural gas exporter, starting to export large amounts of coal. Now remember, if the Democrats get in, this coal goes out the window because they want to end this stuff. Then you can start talking about end of dollar hegemony, but not because of China, but because of an internal change in politics and political structure. But if you need reasons to buy hold dollars in reserves, in addition to all the other reasons that you may have, like holding them as a secure asset, buying U.S. treasuries, keeping them as a reserve asset, well, you need them to buy oil, you need them to buy natural gas, you need them to buy coal from the United States. Germany to buy natural gas from the United States, that was 2018. We also had another story, I did it again, the new petrodollar backed by U.S. oil, natural gas, and coal. So, further underpinnings to the dollar, further destroying the whole Saudi Arabia end of the petrodollar narrative. Because remember, Saudi Arabia is also still pricing its oil in dollars and still only allowing payment in dollars. In addition to that, you then have the United States also charging for its oil in dollars and only accepting dollars for payment. So the dollar's not going away. Now, another one I have here is Trump. I asked in October 2018, Trump just signaled the end of the petrodollar. Remember, the petrodollar is based on the fact that Saudi Arabia would price its oil only in dollars and accept only dollars, provided the United States sold it military hardware and ran to its defense. Well, Trump says Saudi Arabia should pay for its own defense. Well, there goes your petrodollar. Does that mean that Saudi Arabia is going to switch from charging for its oil in dollars only and pricing its oil in dollars only? No way, Jose. They're still doing that, and so what? Because the Saudi arrangement with the United States, like all arrangements, marriage arrangements, relationship relations, they change as time goes on. There's not just a relationship that's set in 1973 and it doesn't change. Because I wrote in October 2018, Saudi Arabia's importance is no longer about oil and the dollar. I repeat it, Saudi Arabia's importance is no longer about the oil and the dollar, even though that's still there, because the United States sells hundreds of billions of dollars worth of military hardware to Saudi Arabia. That's why Trump looked the other way with the Khashoggi. We weren't giving them that hardware. We were selling it to them, and Saudi Arabia was willing to buy it. And Saudi Arabia is the biggest investor in U.S. startups. That's why Saudi Arabia is important. They're not backing the dollar, and if they go away, it's end of dollar hegemony and dollar collapse and game over and de-dollarization and rise of the petro-yuan and multipolar world and all this other nonsense that you hear. Saudi Arabia is actually supporting the phony IPO market in the United States. They buy all of that stuff. They got to put their money somewhere. They can't just keep it in dollars or buy gold with it. And what else happened? I think that's it. So here's where we are today. Dollar index, last 10 years. Uh-oh. Didn't go down, didn't collapse. Went up against all major currencies, especially the game-changing petro-yuan. Went up, and then we have also the mainstream media. Now that Trump is in office, they're all picking up on the gold pumper end of dollar hegemony type of stories. Back in April, Saudi Arabia aims to ditch the dollar and end the petrodollar. And I wrote the end of dollar hegemony articles are flowing again. Completely all they're doing, see, journalists aren't that bright. They just repeat stuff too. They're not necessarily analysts. They like to repeat stuff. They have a political agenda oftentimes. I determined this, and you can criticize the analysis all you want, but this was not a result of me not trying to objectively analyze what was happening, giving all the facts that were available to me at the time and continue to be at the time. And I'm not married to this thesis, but the thesis is that the United States doesn't just roll over and say, okay, well, I guess it's end of dollar hegemony and we're just going to pack up our United States tent and go home. It's the same with when you used to hear people say, United States is just they're going to collapse the dollar to save the market. No, they're not. Why would you say that? Oh, they're going to go to negative interest. They're never going to raise rates yet. Another one, Smaulgld said, yes, they would raise rates. I'm not going to go into all the reasons why I said they would raise rates. They did raise rates. It made sense for them to raise rates. But the narrative stays the same. So now when they finally lower rates, after 8 years of saying the Fed could never raise rates, they're going to say, well, I was right. See, the Fed lowered rates. Yeah, but not when you said they were going to lower rates. And, of course, what happens with these mainstream media articles? I wrote, never go full dollar collapse, because that leads you down looking for information and allowing it to support your thesis that the dollar is going to collapse. Look, everything is going to collapse. Everything's going to end one day. The idea that everything is unsustainable, well, take a look at a lot of other things are probably less sustainable than the U.S. dollar, and that's a picture of Bretton Woods, and the gold standard turned out to be unsustainable, right? Richard Nixon just turned around one day and said, I ain't got it. There's no more gold standard. So if you want to bring your dollars to the United States, have fun, because you're not getting any gold for them. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. If you enjoyed this presentation, please consider supporting Smaulgld via PayPal, making a one-time donation or a recurring donation, or Subscribe Star. I need one more Subscribe Star to get to the minimum. You need 5 on that in order to get your money out. Someone very graciously offered to pay a certain amount to get me in there, but not realizing that you have to stay for when the money is due. So I need somebody who's willing to stay into Subscribe Star at least for about 3 months. So I can get the money out of there. Or you can become a patron. We're up to 25 patrons, 1/3 of the dollar value that was from one patron, which I really appreciate when you get those big donors. And you can donate via Bitcoin, Litecoin. You can support Smaulgld by check or cash or sending items of value like gold. I wouldn't say gold, a little too expensive to send. But silver, people have sent me small amounts of silver to Smaulgld LLC, P.O. Box 714, Dover, New Hampshire 03820. Or, if you're a mug stacker, Smaulgld mug stacker or game changer, add to your mug collection. All the links are below this BitChute, this YouTube, and on the Smaulgld.com channel. Thanks for listening. Let's see if there's any comments over here. Oh, yes, we have them. We got comments. Albert. Oh, we got a lot of people here today. Okay. Hey, Max. Lewis did some great Mario impressions earlier. Well, this because the fiscal policy is what needs to drive the economic recovery in the euro area. How about that one? And then how about Bernie? That's because the 1% in this country got all the wealth, and Mario Draghi doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't understand the concept of free. That's right. All right, what else do we have? All this real vision and macro vision, they're all touting the same stuff. Because the narrative, Joshua says, yes, our gas exports are relying on ships. I bet the next drone attack will be a submarine bombing, says Avriel Blackwing. Taylor Collins is here. Hello, Taylor. All right. Joshua, the petro unit of account meme was created to destroy the global energy sector as part of the AGW con, which eventuates in collectivism. Well, think about who's in favor of end of dollar hegemony and look, if the Democrats get in, they're going to destroy fossil fuels. Right now, the dollar hegemony is based on, in part, the massive amounts of energy that the United States is producing and exporting and using as a weapon. Natural gas to Germany, trying to block out Russia. And what's interesting is the gold pumpers are like, well, China and Russia, they've had it. They're going to get together. The BRICS have had it. I don't understand why, if you're an American and you're a gold pumper, you want China, Russia, India, Brazil, and South Africa to crush the United States. First of all, Brazil, another thing has changed with Brazil. You got tropical Trump down there. He's not interested in crushing the dollar. He's moved away from China and is more a nationalist like Trump is. So scratch Brazil off there. So now you got the RICS. You don't have the BRICS anymore. India and China, not big buddies. They're battling up there in Nepal and northern India over a lot of stuff. They're not working together to crush the dollar. BRICS is a Goldman Sachs, an acronym, and one that the gold pumpers picked up on. And now the anti-Trump media has picked up on it. They want to end the dollar hegemony. They want a recession, and so on. Peter Schiff doesn't even know WTF, Gulf Cooperation Council is. No, Peter just pumps gold. Anything that's good for gold. So China buys gold. China is good. China is smart. West doesn't buy gold. West is stupid. They don't understand. That's the way the gold pumper mind works. If you like gold, you're smart. If you don't like gold, you're stupid. You don't understand. And you're good if you like gold. You just ignore what China does. You ignore the civil rights violations. You ignore the surveillance state. You ignore the massive amount of debt that they've taken on. All you do is focus on the ills of the United States and its debt problems. Yeah, of course the United States has debt problems. But you don't think that in the euro area we have massive amounts of debt that must be paid. But the ECB can only do so much. It's really down to what the fiscal policy is. And we don't have control over that, so we're going to take rates down to zero. We make them lower than the zero, and then we buy some bonds, okay? You have any questions, you ask my friend Bernie Sanders. Look, I've had it with you. You're talking a bunch of nonsense. You don't know, you don't understand the idea of what the damn free stuff means. That's what I say. All right, what else do you say? How can you even... what do we got? What do we have? We got so many questions here. Taylor. I'm going to call it a quits. A lot of comments here, but they look good. All right, everyone. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you tonight. Solid Gold Sunday with Small. We're going to go through the gold market, and it's amazing to me that right now, all the pronouncements of the last week should be screaming, buy gold, buy silver. And this is precisely when the markets don't go higher, because it would make it look like there's no confidence, and therefore you're going to buy gold or silver. And when Mario Draghi says, don't worry, the negative interest rates will not collapse the financial system. Okay. So then Japan, as we mentioned earlier today, says, yeah, okay, so we're going to go further into negative territory, because if they're not going to collapse the system, why not? Let's go further into negative territory, and maybe instead of owning 51% of Japan's ETFs, maybe we buy them all. Don't give Mario any ideas. We need to have the more ETFs in the Eurozone so we could buy them. Okay, Mario. No, you shouldn't have to buy them. ETFs should be free. That's the thing you don't understand, Mario. And if you come to this country, then you're going to have to understand the concept of free. Otherwise, your QE, your negative interest rates, I don't give a damn about them unless you understand the concept of free. Have a good night.